you people out there. My name is Martha Wetmore, wife of George Wetmore and mother of young Martha Wetmore. I was born Martha Isabel Knight, and I am here to tell you the tales of my very colorful family. As you can see, many of us are buried right here in this plot. Now, this is my older brother Harry, John, my father, Isabella, my mother, brother James, and his wife Alicia. And back there is their daughter Thelma and her husband A. Carlos Johnson. And of course, my dear George is buried back here. What you see here is just a portion of 3 strong Knight generations. We had a big family, and many more of us are buried out there in the cemetery. The Knight family was colorful and full of vigor. My father and mother were both born in England. When my father was old enough to work, he went to work for a brewery making ale. He was born in 1828 near London, where he grew up and met and married my mother around 1855. My brother Harry was born a year later. And then father met a brewer named Malston from Canada, who offered him a job. So in 1857, father, mother, and Harry moved to Montreal so father could work in the Malston brewery making ale. My sister Emily was born in Montreal in 1859. In less than a year, father brought the whole family across the border and settled in Fort Edward, where he ran a saloon and brewed beer and ales from 1860 to 1866. And during that time, James and Herbert were born. By 1870, the family moved to 86 South Street in housing that was right next to an ale company that was owned by George Connery and David Ferguson. As was his way, father took over and started brewing some of the best ale, well known throughout northern New York. I was born that year, so that made me the only child born in Glens Falls. The brewery was named the Glens Falls Ale Company when Dad took over, and he quickly recruited his 2 sons, Harry and James, to work in the business. Tragically, Harry died unexpectedly in 1875. He was only 19 years old. In 1880, the company was called the John Knight Brewery. And as a brewer, Dad understood every aspect of the business, and he watched over it like a hawk. The company that he made, he made cream and stock ales from pure malt and hops. And so the company had a reputation for having the best ale product in New York State. In 1884, when James became more influential in the business, they changed the name back to the Glens Falls Ale Company. Now, South Street was a truly fun place to grow up. As I grew, my brothers and sisters grew, and they left the home and went off on their own. Brother Herbert went to work for the Glens Falls Insurance Company, married, and lived at 9 Center Street. I married George Wetmore, and when I first met George, he was working and living at the Rockwell House, and I encouraged him to get a better job before we got married. And he did. he went to work for the First National Bank of Glens Falls as a cashier. So we were married in the Church of the Messiah. My brother James was our best man, and subsequently we had our daughter Martha. After Mother died in 1902, she was 74. George and I moved in with Father and Mother and Brother James, and we had two servants at the house at 86 South Street. Their names were Betsy Waller and Eva Guernsey. Now, Father was getting older, and he had other interests in the village, including a large tenement building at 96 South Street. So therefore, the responsibility for running the brewery fell on Brother James. And Brother James not only was very, very hard working at running this brewery, but he was also working for Warren County, so he was a very busy man. When Father died in 1911, James attempted to give up the running of the Glens Falls Ale Company, but those he sold it to could not keep the business going. So James came back into the business and brought in the nephews and other relatives, and they kept that place going for another 7 years. James, Father, my poor father, okay. James, after Father died, George and I were among the first people to settle on Lincoln Avenue at the old racetrack property. We had a house built there and lived there for more than 40 years. It was a sweet house with a large front porch and 4 bedrooms and all the modern conveniences of the time. We had a perfect place to live, close to everything, on the edge of town and near beautiful Crandall Park. James kept the Glens Falls Ale Company going and producing and making money. And in 1915, he and his wife Alicia had 2 new events come into their lives: the birth of their daughter Thelma and the purchase of the Grove House at the foot of Catskill Bay. James demolished the old house and built a nice summer home on the spot. And for many years, they enjoyed summers there, and the family was invited to go there and enjoy the lake often. There was a movement at this time toward the prohibition of spirits. This worried James and the family a great deal, as they were the largest producers of ale in the area. The temperance movement was active in Glens Falls, and they often met at the Glens Falls Baptist Church. And the Glens Falls Ale Company had been targeted for years. But the momentum for change at this time had now become part of the political scene. Uncle James was worried for nothing. On March 1st, 1918, the worst thing that could happen to any business occurred. The brewery plant burned. The Troy Times said the loss was estimated at $50,000, and 1,000 barrels of malt and an equal amount of hops had been damaged, but there were undamaged barrels of ale in the basement. There was little insurance on the property, and James told the paper there were no plans to rebuild. After the fire, James and Thelma continued to live at 86 South Street. James sold all of his commercial property to Joseph Yanklowitz of the Yanklowitz Trash Company in 1926. James then went to work at the First National Bank of Glens Falls with my George. He actually became a director there. In April of 1939, James died. Alicia moved in with her daughter Thelma and her husband Sparky Johnson at 84 Grant Avenue. Now, Sparky Johnson was quite the character. He was a member of the Glens Falls Operetta Club, and he and Thelma used to perform for ladies' clubs and church groups, and they also sang in the Christchurch United Methodist Choir. Now, Sparky ran the Remington Rand Company at 22 South Street for many years, and then after that, he ran the Glens Falls Business Machines on Dixon Avenue. My George died in 1941. I lived at 7 Lincoln Avenue until I died in 1961. I was almost 92. Those of us who are buried here had very full lives. We had many friends and were active in the community. My nephew Ralph was the general manager and editor of the Glens Falls Post-Star for years. When my mother and father came over from London through Montreal, they had 2 children and a dream. Within 1 generation, the Knights had risen to comfortable middle-class status with nice housing, a camp on Lake George, and an educated family. Actually, we might have even had a little money. Glens Falls afforded us the American dream, and we worked hard to achieve it. Thank you for listening to my story.